So this is the non-dual lectionary for the second Sunday after Pentecost in year A, and we're now going to follow Matthew through all of the season of Pentecost, the longest season of the church year. And we start with reading today that I think has some nuggets we can glean from Matthew chapter 9, verses 9 through 13, and then 18 to 26. As Jesus was walking along, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at the tax collection station, and he said to him, "Follow me." And he got up and followed him. And as he sat at dinner in the house, many tax collectors and sinners came and were sitting with Jesus and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" But when he heard this, he said, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." While he was saying these things to them, suddenly a leader came in and knelt before him, saying, "My daughter has just died, but come and lay your hand on her, and she will live." And Jesus got up and followed him with his disciples. Then suddenly a woman who had been suffering from a flow of blood for 12 years came up behind him and touched the fringe of his cloak. For she was saying to herself, "If I only touch his cloak, I will be made well." Jesus turned and seeing her, he said, "Take heart, daughter, your faith has made you well." And the woman was made well from that moment. When Jesus came to the leader's house and saw the flute players and the crowd making a commotion, he said, "Go away, for the girl is not dead but sleeping." And they laughed at him. When the crowd had been put outside, he went in and took her by the hand, and the girl got up. And the report of this spread through all of that district. So the second story talked some before about miracles and healing and raising from the dead and all the things we might take from that. It's this first section. There's just a couple little pieces in here that I want to focus on. And the first is, this question, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? And the response, those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. And that's something really cool, right? There's, this gets taken as like Jesus just speaking, like why he's come from God, right? But as a teaching, as like, in guru teacher mode, it's good stuff, I think. Um, and especially when we pair it with the next sentence too. But the first thing, right? Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. And so there's something here, I think, of like, well, Alan Watts taught, well, I'll get to that actually in a second. The first thing is like sinking into that recognition in ourselves, right? Now, the first thing is just when we have that, even a glimpse of that non-dual recognition, like non-dual part of, what comes online, right, is the identity that is not this small self, but it is like it gets talked about as like one with everything, right? But not even as the ego understands one with everything, right? But that like that underlying like this self as an expression of everything, right? And so first of all, there's like a whole richness in this like one sentence, right? Because the first thing is, well, first of all, that includes anybody. It includes everybody, right? Not just everybody, but everything, and the movement of all, right? Because that's a more fundamental identity that's being expressed just through this one and all other ones. Um, and so any striving of like this is the group that's saved, right? And this is not, right? These are the people that are righteous, and these are the people that are not, misses the mark, that right isn't part of, like, is inconsistent with that recognition in a way, in a way. Um, but the second part, like as a teaching then too, right, is something like, hey, you know, um, if you recognize you need something, right? That can be a first step. If you recognize that if you're if the way like it's almost like if the deeper self recognition pokes enough into the ego self that the ego self recognizes that something is missing. And in truth, all of our ego selves always recognize something's missing because that's what they're doing, is trying to in vain keep it together, right? Then, but if you can bring that recognition just that small recognition to the ego, like I can't do it, right? I'm not in control. That like first, like I can't do it. Then that, like I need something. I need help, right? Or just like that surrender. Um, the in need of a physician, right? Like the this gets taken as I'm a sinner and I'm sick and I'm ill, but I'm not worthy, but that's not the point, I don't think, right? It's more like just the recognition of like that there's more, it's closer to surrender, right? It's closer to like I can't do it. And that's what brings us, I think, to the second sentence too, right? I desire mercy, not sacrifice, because I think like the coded way to read that, I think, is sacrifice is like a way of I'm in control, right? Even when I'm like not like I'm not running things, I'm not in charge, right? But sacrifice is a way of like I'm still doing it, right? Whereas mercy is saying I can't do it. It's that surrender again. And then so I think all of that fits together in a way of like there's this teaching that's just bubbling up right here, at this early call with Matthew. But then the other thing I'd say, right, which is, this comes from Alan Watts also, he talks about, the idea of a physician, right, is uh, you go to the physician to help you get well. And when you're well, you don't go back. Now of course you check in, and you want to make sure things are okay, but you don't go every week to the doctor. Um, and that's something he points out about like, the difference between, oh, we might call it spirituality, but I don't even want to use that word, right? But the difference between truly trying to live into awakening or live into the non-dual recognition, right? Versus the the church or religion or any institutionalized setting, right? That has, even if it's carrying forward the stories of, the and reinterpreting them, and it has these seeds, and this here we're, I'm doing it every week here, but you can do the same thing and sometimes even easier, right? In the Hindu stories and the Buddhist stories and all of that. But if you develop an interest in keeping people coming back, then you're no longer a physician, right? Now you're a club owner or a club manager. And that is not what Jesus is talking about here, right? So I do just like that's a nice little seed by itself too, I think, and we could unpack that and it's really rich also. Um, but what's fundamentally going on here underneath everything, right? Is like if our deepest self true nature, right, is always like peeking out, like in a way wants to be born, but isn't even striving, right? Because everything's already okay. But that fundamental instinct is coming up through the ego self, right? Then that sense of like, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, or I'm coming as a physician, for the sick. If that resonates, like, and maybe it isn't this language, right? Again, we're, using language from 2000 years ago. Maybe it's in other language today. And, most of what I find rich is in other language today. But if it resonates somehow, right, it's because he's pointing at what already is inside you, right? And just uh, bringing it forth more strongly and in letting it go from there.